she looked at him, smiled softly, and then said, "You can leave. I'm a single mom." Something inside him cracked so quietly that no one else in the cafe noticed, but his entire world did. It had been going so well. The sunlight streamed through the large glass windows of the quiet daytime cafe, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. Outside, people walked by with coffee cups and hurried conversations, but inside, everything felt still, almost cinematic, like time had paused just for this one moment. Arav Malik sat across from a woman he had begun to believe might change his life. For the first time in years, he had allowed himself to hope, and then, in a single sentence, everything shifted. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who never give up on love, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Home with Dad. Your support means everything and helps stories like this reach more hearts. Arav had not always been this guarded. 5 years earlier, he had been a different man. Louder, lighter, full of plans that stretched far into the future. Back then, life had felt predictable in the best way. He had a small but steady job as a civil engineer, a loving wife named Nina, and a baby boy who had just learned how to wrap his tiny fingers around Arav's thumb. Everything had seemed stable, like a house built on solid ground. Until the day it all collapsed. The accident had been sudden, merciless, and irreversible. One rainy afternoon, a truck lost control on a slippery road, and in a matter of seconds, Nina was gone. Arav remembered standing in a hospital corridor, the harsh white lights above him buzzing faintly, as a doctor spoke words that didn't make sense at the time. It felt like someone had pressed mute on the world. He could see lips moving, people walking, machines beeping, but he couldn't hear anything except the deafening silence inside him. He was left alone with his son, Vihan, who was barely 1 year old. Grief did not come all at once. It came in waves. Sometimes it was loud, crashing into him when he least expected it. Other times it was quiet, sitting beside him like a shadow he could never escape. But through it all, there was Vihan, a small child who didn't understand loss but understood love in its purest form. A child who needed him, depended on him, trusted him completely, and so Arav learned how to survive. He learned how to wake up at 3 a.m. to soothe a crying baby. He learned how to cook simple meals while holding a toddler on his hip. He learned how to braid tiny strands of hair for school functions, even though his hands were clumsy at first. He learned how to answer questions he wasn't ready for, like why other children had mothers at school events and Vihan didn't. Most importantly, he learned how to smile again, not because he wasn't hurting, but because his son deserved to see light in his father's eyes. Years passed. Life didn't become easier, but it became manageable. Arav built routines, found stability, and slowly carved out a life that, while imperfect, was filled with quiet moments of joy. Vihan grew into a bright, curious boy with a laugh that echoed through their small apartment like music. Still, there was an emptiness. Not just the absence of Nina, but the absence of companionship. Someone to talk to after a long day. Someone to share the small victories and quiet struggles. Someone who understood that love didn't replace what was lost, it simply created something new. For a long time, Arav ignored that emptiness. He told himself he didn't need anything more, that his life, centered around his son, was enough. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. It was Vihan who changed things. One evening, as they sat on the floor building a puzzle together, Vihan looked up and asked a simple question. He asked why Arav never went out like other parents, why he never met friends or smiled at anyone the way other people did. It wasn't said with judgment, just curiosity. That question stayed with Arav. A week later, with hesitant fingers and a heart full of uncertainty, he created a profile on a dating app. It felt strange, almost unnatural, like stepping into a world he had forgotten how to navigate. He wasn't looking for perfection. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. He just knew he wanted to try. That's when he met Sarah. Her profile was simple. No exaggerated descriptions, no polished perfection. Just a genuine smile in her photos and a short bio that spoke about her love for books, long walks, and meaningful conversations. There was something honest about her, something that felt real in a space that often didn't. Their conversations started slowly. A few messages turned into longer chats. Late-night texts turned into phone calls. There was an ease in talking to her, a comfort that surprised him. She didn't ask intrusive questions, didn't push him to reveal more than he was ready to. She listened. She understood silences. For the first time in years, Ara found himself looking forward to something that wasn't just part of his routine. And so, eventually, they decided to meet. That day, the sun was bright, the air warm, and the world seemed unusually kind. Arav had dropped Vihan at school, his heart racing in a way he hadn't felt in years. He stood in front of his wardrobe longer than necessary, trying to decide what to wear, as if the right shirt could somehow determine the outcome of the day. When he arrived at the cafe, Syra was already there. She looked exactly like her photos, but somehow more real, more present. Her smile was gentle, her eyes thoughtful, and when she greeted him, there was a warmth that immediately put him at ease. The conversation flowed naturally. They talked about work, about books, about life. They laughed at small things, shared stories, and found unexpected similarities. There were moments of silence, but they weren't awkward. They were comfortable, like pauses in a song you didn't want to end. Arav felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. It wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was quiet, like a small flame flickering in the distance. But it was there. And then, just as everything seemed to be falling into place, Syra's expression changed. It was subtle. A slight hesitation. A shift in her posture. She looked down, at her cup, then back at him, as if gathering the courage to say something important. That's when she said it. "You can leave. I'm a single mom." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unexpected. Arav blinked, confused. For a moment he thought he had misheard her, but the seriousness in her eyes told him otherwise. She wasn't joking. She wasn't being dramatic. She was bracing herself for rejection, because that's what usually happened. Syra had been here before. She had seen the change in people's expressions, the polite excuses, the sudden urgency to leave. She had learned to say it early, to avoid wasting time, to protect herself from deeper disappointment. In her experience, being a single mother wasn't just a detail, it was a deal breaker. And so she prepared herself for the same outcome. But Arav didn't get up. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't look at his watch or make an excuse. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying her face with a kind of quiet understanding that caught her off guard. Then, slowly, almost gently, he said something she didn't expect. He told her that he understood, not in a superficial way, not as a polite response, but in a way that carried weight, experience, and truth. Because he was a single parent too. The moment he said it, something shifted. The tension that had built up between them began to dissolve. Syra's guarded expression softened, her eyes widening slightly as she processed what he had just revealed. For the first time, she wasn't alone in that moment. They sat there, two people who had been shaped by loss, responsibility, and resilience, suddenly seeing each other more clearly than before. The conversation that followed was different, deeper, more honest. They talked about their children, about the challenges of raising them alone, about the sleepless nights and the quiet fears. They spoke about the strength it took to keep going, even when life didn't go as planned. There were no pretenses anymore, no need to impress or hide, just two people sharing their truths. As the afternoon turned into early evening, neither of them wanted to leave. What had started as a simple first date had turned into something much more meaningful. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real, and sometimes that's enough. Near the end of their time together, Arav realized something important. Love didn't always come in perfect packages. It didn't always arrive at the right time or in the way you expected. Sometimes it came with complications, responsibilities, and scars, but that didn't make it any less beautiful. If anything, it made it more meaningful, because it was built on truth, not illusion. Before we reach the ending, if this story has touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Home with Dad. And here's a special request. Comment the word hope if you believe that love can find us again, even after life breaks us. As they stepped out of the cafe, the world outside seemed unchanged, but something inside both of them had shifted. They didn't make grand promises, they didn't rush into anything, but they agreed to meet again. And sometimes, that's how the most beautiful stories begin, not with certainty, but with a simple decision to try. Arav returned home that evening to find Vihan waiting at the door, his small face lighting up with excitement. As Arav lifted him into his arms, he realized that his life wasn't just about